Today, we're diving into something huge, something that's all around us, but we barely see it. We're talking about the invisible rules of life itself. Yeah, the rules that govern everything from a tiny microbe to a massive herd of elephants. I mean, have you ever just stopped and wondered, how does a bee know exactly which flower has the good stuff? Or what's the deal with some flowers only opening up at night? You might think it's all just random, but nope. These are actually little clues pointing to a much, much bigger system at play. And the science that gives us the decodering for all of this, it's called ecology. It's the playbook for how life on our planet actually works. Okay, so let's get right into it. What in the world is ecology, really? Here's the key thing to get about ecology. It's really the science of relationships. It's not just about, making a big list of all the plants and animals. No way. It's all about understanding that super complicated web of connections, how living things interact with each other, and how they connect to the non-living world around them. The dirt, the water, the weather, all of it. And ecologists look at these connections at all different levels, from a single organism all the way up to huge biomes. But today, we're going to zoom in on one of the most important levels, the one where the real action happens, the population. So, what makes a group of animals a population in the eyes of an ecologist? It's a bit more specific than you might think. Right, so a population isn't just any old bunch of creatures. We're talking about a specific group, like all the cormorants down at the local wetland, or every single lotus plant in one particular pond. They're sharing the same space, they're all going after the same resources, and crucially, they're a breeding group. Okay, and this is where you have to kind of shift your thinking. See, an individual, well, it's born, it lives, it dies. Simple enough. But a population? It has these whole other characteristics that an individual just doesn't have. We're talking about things like a birth rate and a death rate, or even a sex ratio, how many males versus females there are. Think of them like the vital signs, but for the entire group. And those vital signs are what drive the central story of any population. The story of its growth, its incredible booms, and its dramatic busts. So let's imagine a perfect world for a second. Let's say a species has all the food it could ever want, endless space, and zero predators. What do you think happens to its population? Well, the growth is just explosive, totally unchecked. Ecologists have a name for this, exponential growth. And if you graph it, you get this really distinct J-shaped curve that shoots straight up. It represents the absolute full-throttle reproductive power of a species. There's this old story that just nails this idea perfectly. It's about a king who loses a bet on a chessboard. The prize he has to pay seems simple enough. 1 grain of wheat on the first square, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, just doubling it each time. Well, he wasn't even halfway across the board before it hit him. There wasn't enough wheat in his entire kingdom to pay up. That, right there, is the absolutely mind-blowing power of exponential growth. It's an amazing story, but let's be real. It's a fantasy. Because in the real world, nothing is unlimited. There are always limits. And that brings us to maybe one of the most important ideas in all of ecology, carrying capacity. Scientists use the letter K for it. It's basically the maximum number of individuals that an environment can handle over the long haul. It's nature's built-in speed limit, and it applies to every single species, including us. So this reality of limits gives us a much more common growth pattern in nature, logistic growth. A population starts off growing fast, but as it gets closer to that carrying capacity, things get crowded, resources get tight, and growth starts to slow way down and eventually just levels off. This gives you a much more realistic S-shaped curve. So populations are kept in check by resources, but they're also shaped by their neighbors. See, no species lives in a vacuum, and that takes us to the fascinating world of how they all interact with each other. You can actually classify pretty much any interaction between two species with a simple code. A plus sign if it's a benefit, a minus sign if it's harmful, and a 0 if it has no effect at all. Let's look at a few of the big ones. When you have a plus-plus interaction, that's called mutualism. It's the ultimate win-win scenario. Just look at the fig and its specific wasp. The fig tree can only be pollinated by that one type of wasp, and in return, that wasp can only lay its eggs inside that specific kind of fig. Their survival is literally tied together. Then, of course, you've got your plus-minus interactions like predation. And yeah, it seems pretty tough on the prey, but predators play such a critical role in keeping the whole ecosystem in balance. This is a perfect example. Back in the 1920s, somebody brought the prickly pear cactus to Australia. Big mistake. With no natural enemies, it just exploded, growing exponentially and taking over millions of acres. The only thing that fixed the problem was bringing in its natural predator, a moth, which finally got the cactus population under control. But what about when it's minus minus? What happens when two species both suffer because they're fighting over the same scarce resource? Well, that's the age-old story of competition. There's a fundamental rule here called the competitive exclusion principle. Basically, it says that if two species are fighting for the exact same thing, one of them is going to be better at it and will eventually drive the other one out. We saw this in the Galapagos. Goats were introduced to an island, and they were such good browsers that they completely outcompeted the native Abingdon tortoise, which went extinct in less than 10 years. But nature is clever. It's not always a fight to the death. To get around this direct competition, species have evolved this amazing strategy called resource partitioning. There's a famous study by an ecologist named Robert MacArthur who found 5 different species of warblers, all living happily in the same type of tree. How? Well, they split it up. Some fed at the top, others in the middle, some on the outer branches. Each one found its own little job, its own niche, so they didn't have to compete. So after all this, it really brings us to one last huge question. We've talked about how populations grow, how nature puts on the brakes with carrying capacity, and how everything is connected in this incredible web of life. But what about us? We're the one species that has completely rewritten its own growth curve and messed with the interactions of nearly every other species on the planet. So you have to ask yourself, what is our role in this whole story?